Yo, what's good everyone? Today I'm going to be taking a first look here at this Week 2 NFL DraftKings main slate. Let's dive right into it. And like I always do here in these videos, I'm going to go position by position, highlighting the plays that are sticking out to me here early in the week, and then we'll wrap up this video by putting together a first look cash lineup and a first look tournament lineup. And for those of you who didn't know, I do post 2 videos on Friday before the main slate as well, breaking down my final favorite cash game plays and my final favorite tournament plays. So make sure you stay tuned for those videos on Friday too. And before we jump into the quarterbacks here, everyone, if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. It's completely free to do, and we're trying to hit 5,000 subs on this YouTube channel by the end of September. And I know that's probably a lofty goal considering I'm 500 subs away from that, but I know there's enough people watching these videos who are not subscribed, so subscribe. I'm just kidding. All right, let's get into the quarterbacks here. Looking right at the top, we got Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. If you watched that game on Sunday night, these two were absolutely electric, really showing why they were the top 2 in MVP voting last season. They're pretty much the same player. I mean, there are differences for sure, but we're basically getting the same type of upside out of both of these guys here. Now, just based off of what I saw Aaron Rodgers do to the New York Jets defense last week, I'm kind of leaning towards Josh Allen here as my favorite between the two. But honestly, if you pick either one of these guys at $7,000, we're shooting for 3x in our cash lineup, 4-5x in our tournament lineups. We know both these guys can hit those numbers. So they're right at the top. They stick out to me, but I do like them a little bit better than Jalen Hurts here. Kind of my tier 1 players, if you will. The next guy that I wanted to discuss here then was Joe Burrow. Now, I know Cincinnati notoriously starts the season slow. It was a divisional game against the Cleveland Browns, but 14 for 23, 113 passing yards and 1 touchdown. I was expecting a little bit more out of Joe Burrow here, but I do believe this is a great bounce back spot here this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They really didn't get tested in week 1 against Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers, but I do believe that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to do that here this week. Bounce back game for both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so you could stack them up, do a single stack. Maybe we'll build a tournament lineup around that at the end here, but at $6,600, Joey B is definitely sticking out to me here this week. And I know a lot of people are probably not going to love this one here, but at $5,900, tournament only, Dak Prescott did catch my attention. I think it's because I like the stacking pieces there in this matchup against the Giants. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, but you got George Pickens now, kind of a deep threat. We could even go with someone like Ferguson if we wanted to, but overall, I don't know what it was, but I think back at home here, matchup against Eagles week 1, that was really tough. I don't know, he just kind of stuck out to me. So, not pushing all my chips into the middle right now with Dak Prescott. But again, first look here, he did stick out to me. And then the last quarterback that I wanted to highlight here was Justin Fields. Now, if you watched my videos last week, I didn't have a lot of nice things to say about Justin Fields, so I do owe him an apology. He's been up and down throughout his NFL career. We all know this. Now he's on a new team with the New York Jets. I really just wasn't expecting much. We know the rushing upside is there with this guy, right? One of the best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL, but he was a much better passer of the ball on Sunday than, again, I was expecting. 16 of 22, 218 passing yards, 1 touchdown. Did have 2 rushing touchdowns as well. Maybe he's just happy to be back with his college wide receiver and Garrett Wilson. I don't know, but considering that Buffalo defense did not look good on Sunday night, albeit playing against the Ravens and Lamar, I think Justin Fields could have another decent day here, again, considering the price at $5,700. So those were the quarterbacks that stuck out to me here on Monday night. Again, first look here. Make sure you stay tuned for my final videos on Friday, but let's move on to the running backs. And this week, we got 2 running backs priced in the $8K range, probably rightfully so here with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. I'm not saying that I don't like those guys heading into week 2, but Christian McCaffrey is the guy that sticks out to me at $7,500. If people were concerned about his workload heading into week 1, the calf does not seem to be an issue. Now, 69 rushing yards. We're used to seeing a little more out of him with 22 carries, but he did have 9 receptions as well. We love that for PPR. 73 receiving yards on 10 targets. $7,500 this week. in a matchup against New Orleans, who should be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. Yeah, absolutely sign me up for some CMC here in week 2. Now, we got some good running backs at the top below him. Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Chase Brown, though, sitting in this matchup against Jacksonville. Really hard for me to ignore that. He should basically be a bell cow back all year long. We didn't see that at the beginning of last season. We had Zach Moss in Cincinnati, but once Moss got hurt, Chase Brown turned into one of the best running backs in the NFL when it came to fantasy scoring. Obviously involved in the running game, but he's a running back who can catch the ball too, and I talked about how much I love that matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to go back to James Conner here once again as well, considering the matchup against Carolina. I really wish these game logs were updated. We'll go to the news here. Did carry the ball for just 12 times for 39 yards, but again, another one of those running backs who can see 4 or 5 plus targets in a game. Do like that matchup against Carolina, like I said, and especially considering they're back at home here this week. One running back who sticks out to me on the tournament side of things, and talked about Justin Fields, I like Breece Hall here as well. Now, he obviously does not run the ball like Derrick Henry, but we saw what Derrick Henry did to that Buffalo defense on Sunday night, and Breece Hall, watching that game against the Steelers, looked really, really good. Explosive with the ball in his hands, had some big runs. You can see there 19 times, 107 rushing yards. He had 4 targets as well, $6,200. Maybe not a cash game consideration, but now that I'm saying that out loud, I might be crazy not going there. In any case, I think he's going to be a tournament consideration at the very least, considering that price and the matchup. And then I kind of like Chuba Hubbard here as well in this matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. Really just the opportunity stuck out to me with this running back as well. Ran the ball for 16 times for 57 yards in week 1. Had 5 targets as well. 21 total opportunities for a guy priced at $6,000. I do kind of like that. And then we kind of get into this 5K range, right? I'm not going to drill into each one of these guys individually, but the running backs that stuck out to me here in the 5K range, Tony Pollard, Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, and Tyrone Tracy. And again, it really just comes down to the opportunity that these guys are getting. For example here, I know R.J. Harvey had that big run in Denver. I think it was 50 yards or 60 yards he had on one particular run, but it was J.K. Dobbins here. If you go to the news, ran the ball for 16 times in that game. He was kind of the lead back. So that's really what I'm looking for at this time of year. Just opportunity, good pricing, and good matchups. Obviously, it's early in the season, so there's a lot of question marks we're still working through. Which teams are good, which teams are bad, which offenses are good, which defenses are bad, and kind of plugging in those plays here based off of the opportunity, again, early in the season. So that's what I have here for a first look. Let's move on to the wide receivers. And you guys know with the wide receivers, I really like to break these into different tiers because the reality is there's so many different wide receivers to choose from. You could probably make a case for 40 to 50% of these guys week in and week out, especially when it comes to your tournaments. So my tier 1 guys here at the top are going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown to Jamar Chase, and my favorites of those guys are going to be Chase and CeeDee Lamb. I know they're the top 2 guys here when it comes to pricing, but the reality is I more so like the matchup for those guys compared to Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jamar Chase here, without sounding like a broken record, this is a beautiful matchup against that Jaguars defense, and I think this is a great bounce back spot for that Cincinnati offense, especially playing at home. CeeDee Lamb, huge drop in that game against the Eagles in week 1. He's well aware of it, came out in his post-game interview and said, I need to catch that ball. But 13 targets, come on. That's the reason I like him, and especially at this price. If you're telling me, hey, you're going to give CeeDee Lamb 10 plus targets this game, you could price him at $8,500 or $9,000, and I'd probably still consider him in this matchup against the New York Giants. Now, my tier 2 wide receivers here are going to be DK Metcalf to Brian Thomas Jr. And my favorites from there are Brian Thomas Jr., Zay Flowers, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and DK Metcalf. Again, there's a handful of guys here you can make a case for. I talked about how I like Justin Fields, Garrett Wilson here, $6,500. You could easily convince me into playing that as a stack in tournaments. Cortland Sutton, he's kind of a touchdown monster with Bo Nix. So, I'm going to highlight the guys, like I said, my favorites here, Brian Thomas Jr., a disappointing week 1, right? He had, 7 targets, only 1 catch. This is a new offense, or at least a new offensive coordinator in there with Liam Combs. You can see that here. They kind of mentioned that. If people are going to be off of him because of one bad game, and I don't know, it's Monday night, maybe his ownership will be higher than I expected, but I don't foresee that happening. Travis Hunter's now in the mix, so if we can get him at lower ownership against a defense that was brutal last year in the Cincinnati Bengals, I will take advantage of that. Zay Flowers looked really good in that Sunday night game against the Buffalo Bills. You can see here 9 targets, 7 receptions, 143 yards. He looked like he took a next step in his game. Jackson Smith and Jigba, clearly the wide receiver one with new quarterback and Sam Darnold there. 13 targets, 124 receiving yards. And then DK Metcalf, he kind of have the revenge narrative here, right? But he also saw 7 targets with Aaron Rodgers, so I do like that price there at $5,900. Then dipping a little bit lower here into the 5K range, I do like Marvin Harrison Jr. here in this matchup against Carolina. Looked pretty good in this matchup here against the New Orleans Saints. He caught 5 of 6 targets, scored a touchdown in that game. Hopefully those numbers and targets continue to go up as the season goes on. And then the other guy that I wanted to highlight here in this range was McMillan. Now, Bryce Young did not look good in week 1. Hopefully we can get the Bryce Young that played towards the end of last season, but I'm not entirely sure I'm a believer there. But what I do like is that we saw McMillan get 9 targets in this game here, got 5 of those for 68 yards. I honestly think we can consider him in cash this week considering the matchup there and the price. And then we get into this lower 5K range, 4K range, and there's a handful of guys that stick out to me. My favorite is going to be Ricky Parcell here. We have no George Kittle, at least I don't expect him to play here this week. Juwan Jennings left banged up in that game last week as well. It might just be Parcell and CMC kind of running the show here in this matchup against New Orleans, so I wouldn't mind playing both of those guys in my cash lineup. Handful of other guys that kind of stuck out to me here. Hollywood Brown, you got him at $5,200. Now Rashee Rice is suspended. Xavier Worthy on the shelf. He should be the wide receiver one in that offense. Keon Coleman looked pretty damn good. He might be another guy who takes the next step in his sophomore season. 11 targets, caught 8 of those balls in that Sunday night game against Baltimore. You got Stephon Diggs here at $5,000, who I don't mind against Miami. And then Chris Olave. He got a bit banged up in that game as well. Spencer Rattler threw him a ball to just get absolutely crushed, but he did throw him the ball 13 times. And if we're going to get that type of volume here for a guy priced in the 4K range, I'll absolutely take advantage of that as well. Next, we got the tight ends here, and Trey McBride does stick out to me at the top at $6,000 in this matchup against Carolina. Honestly, might be able to consider him in cash considering the volume he got last week with 9 targets. And again, this matchup against Carolina, who should be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. With that being said, though, I think I like this mid 4K range just a little bit more. You got Sam Laporta there at $4,800. I quite like that. But Tyler Warren, first-round draft pick for the Indianapolis Colts, looked awesome in that game against Miami. Now, Miami looked horrible, don't get me wrong. This should be a tougher matchup against Denver, but I'm not overly concerned about it because the reality is the biggest target we need to avoid is Pat Surtain on that defense for the Denver Broncos, and he should be locked up on Michael Pittman if I had to guess. He's certainly not going to follow Tyler Warren around, so at $4,500, 9 targets last week with the ball in his hand, he looked good. I think that might be my favorite tight end play. I think Hunter Henry's going to be a fine play, Dallas Goedert, Jake Ferguson, and then going back to Brenton Strange here at $3,600 for looking to save some money. He had 4 targets, 4 catches, and a team high 59 yards, and another matchup here against Cincinnati that I don't mind. So tight ends, like I said, a little cheaper for me here on the early on look. Tyler Warren looks really nice at $4,500, but I don't mind paying up for a guy like Trey McBride this week as well in a good matchup against Carolina. And then we got the defenses here. I certainly don't mind going back to the Denver Broncos at $3,500. That defense is loaded with talent. Obviously a tougher matchup here against the Indianapolis Colts compared to the Tennessee Titans, especially going on the road, but one I'm not overly concerned about. I do like the Cardinals here at $3,400 at home against Carolina because, again, Bryce Young did not look good in week 1. Scrolling down a little bit off of that here into the 2K range, I like the Colts here going up against the Denver Broncos at home. Colts looked really good against Miami. Again, I don't think Miami's going to be a good football team this year, but Bo Nix and that Broncos offense didn't look looks stellar at home against the Tennessee Titans. So I think the Colts are my preferred play here at $2,600 for my cash lineups. And then if I'm looking for a cheap tournament defense, I kind of like the Titans here as well at home at $2,400. All right, everyone, now we're going to put together a first look cash lineup here. But before we do that, if you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Every like, comment, and sub that you guys leave truly does help me out. And considering we spent down at the quarterback position last week in our first look lineup, let's spend up here in week 2. And let's go with Josh Allen in this matchup against the New York Jets. I like the idea of putting in 3 running backs, usually in most of my cash lineups, so let's go with that idea here. We're going to go with Christian McCaffrey, we're going to go with Chase Brown, and then come back into the running backs for our flex and put in James Conner, which means we'll have to spend down throughout the rest of our lineup, but I'm okay doing that. I do like the value here in the 4-5K range for the wide receivers. Let's go with White Boy Rick here. Considering that Juwan Jennings and probably George Kittle are going to be out this week, good matchup there against New Orleans. And let's go with McMillan as well at $5,400. But then I'm going to pivot to the tight ends here and just go to Strange, because I know he's relatively cheap, and save us a little bit of money there. Defense, let's put in the Colts, which leaves us with $5,100 for the last wide receiver. And we can go with Keon Coleman there, putting a little stack with Josh Allen. Love the targets he got last week. And I don't mind this for a first look cash lineup either. And then what did I say? We're going to go with a Cincy stack, I believe, with on the tournament side of things here. So let's go ahead, put in Joey B with his top wide receiver in Jamar Chase. We're just going to do a 1-to-1 stack here and run it back with Travis Etienne to begin with and see how this plays out. Where is he priced? Only $5,700. Okay, it's a good start in my opinion. Let's go with Breece Hall as well here at $6,200. And then we're going to go back to White Boy Rick. Where are you? $5,300. Let's go ahead into the tight end position. Spend a little bit more than Brenton Strange. We're going to go with Hunter Henry in this matchup against Miami. That defense for Miami looked brutal last week. Defense, let's go to a defense here. And I'm going to put in the Titans. $2,400. Saving a little bit of money here, right? And that gives us $5,850 per player. We got a wide receiver and a flex. So let's put in DK Metcalf. Revenge game narrative here against Seattle. And then $5,800 for the flex. Marvin Harrison, George Pickens. Let's go with Marv there in that matchup against Carolina. Honestly, I quite like this from a tournament perspective. Some nice upside here. Got a run back there with Travis Etienne on the Cincy stack. Yeah, first look here. I like that for a tournament. All right, everyone, that is going to wrap up this video here for today. As always, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to watch the content here on this channel. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that.